and as being kind of an extremist book. And one of the things that I saw, and I recently did an article on artificial intelligence for the Huffington Post, is that a lot of experts believe that artificial intelligence will be here within 10 to 15 years. It's kind of a foregone conclusion at this point. There are many companies working on such things, and they are spending hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars on such things, because it represents a huge commercial kind of advantage if you could develop things like that. And besides, it probably will change the way intellect, education, all these other things occur once we have an artificial intelligence that is quite smarter than human beings. And the reason I bring it up is because one of the main things that the novel is about is it incorporates a brand new morality. And the morality is loosely based upon the philosophy in the book, which is task for teleological egocentric functionalism. But the morality is very much not necessarily the human morality that we have today, but the type of morality that a artificial intelligence might have in 10 or 15 years. And I can assure you it's probably not going to be as simplistic or as mammalian or as nice as the one that we have. It might develop or evolve right out of any kind of programming of love or any kind of programming of mammalian comfort and care that we seem to have for each other. And so as I presented the humanicide formula in the book, and that is kind of the darkest, most extreme versions of the book, of any concept in the book that you can find, it is kind of a tribute or a tip of the hat to the upcoming artificial intelligence. Not only to artificial intelligence embracing such ideas, but to artificial intelligence thinking of such ideas. I am also, I'm quite against such concepts, and I've, said that publicly. I don't see it as necessarily advantageous for anyone in the human race to be lost in some kind of great war between machines or people. But I see it as something we very much need to worry about, and something that we also have to consider. So it was brought out in the book as a way to say, if as a human being we are competing against machines of high, incredible intelligence, what value do human beings actually have to those machines? And if we have no value, then perhaps the machines aren't going to want us around. And that's what the humanicide formula is essentially about. And in the book, it comes out as kind of humans against humans. But, like I said, we're only 10, 15 years away from such technology existing. So already this idea of evolving, the transhumans evolving into machine intelligences is right around the corner. So, the next 10, 20 years are going to be very interesting. But to answer your question, that is the main reason that I have put in the humanicide formula, which took me weeks and weeks to decide if I wanted to put it in, and has probably been one of the most hot-button topics of the novel itself.
Yeah, I can see that. That's all I really have right now, at least on my end. Ned, questions?
Yeah, Zoltan, first, again, thanks for sending the book. It was a very interesting read. I really enjoyed a lot of parts of it, but on the other end, found a lot of it disturbing. So, I mean,
negation, real quick. Can I make an announcement real quick? Guys, chat is down. You can try to refresh, but it's Vaughn Live TV. It's not on our end, so our chat is down. And I apologize for that, guys, but it's not my end. It's Vaughn Live TV. And negation, I'll cut all this out, but I apologize. Go ahead. Just want to keep on trying to refresh. If you keep on trying to refresh, it might come up.
Y'all are going to have to call in to get your questions in here.
So, yeah, there you go.
Anyway. Back to Zoltan again. Thanks a lot. I mean, I definitely enjoyed the read, and it was interesting to say the least. Even though it's kind of like a lot of things that Stephen King does. You read it and you're like, God, I don't know if I'm glad I read that or not. But
of course.
But Jethro is, let's say, an interesting character to say the least. I don't want to give away too much, but guys, I am going to warn you. There are probably going to be a couple of spoilers here today.
Yeah.
I guess the first question I got is I'm a lot like you. I do think that this is going to be embraced. We are going to really start to multiply, if you will, longevity. And once we start to go down that road and we start to become more like a transhumanist society, if you will, I almost see that as branching off into a entirely new species, kind of the same way that cooking allowed us to branch off from the great apes. do you feel that same way? And if so, what ramifications do you think that, I mean, how will the people that don't want to embrace this type of technology, what do you think is going to happen to them?
Well, so it's an excellent question. I think it's one of the most common ones too, because I think, yes, within 10, 15, definitely within 25 years, it will be clear to say that we are virtually a different species. I had just been reading a great article that was taking back a commercial of Radio Shack from about 20 years ago. And virtually everything on the Radio Shack ad is now done on a tiny iPhone. And that's only in, 20 years. And I figure, well, in 20 years, if it went from, stereo system, woofers, VCRs to something like that to this, what's going to happen in 20 years from our cell phone? Well, likely it's going to be a tiny chip. And of course, it grows faster. It grows exponentially. So it's not just going to be that fast as 20 years. It's going to be twice that fast. It's very likely within 20 years, we'll have phones inside our head. We'll have phones that are connecting with certain neural activity in our brains, and we can do stuff directly like that. And, that's the point when we start doing some of the biohacking, when you ask, well, what really defines a species? I don't know if using a phone against our head actually redefines a species, but I do believe that once you put something inside and you mix it with your biology, and it's kind of a permanent part of you, that probably is the beginning of a new species. Now, when we talk about it, it feels very uncomfortable. It feels very foreign and alien. However, the way technology progresses, so far everyone's been really on board with technology. I think most people feel we would be lost without it these days. And so I think as long as it's done carefully, and as long as it's done, there are tests to make sure it's safe, people are going to embrace this and definitely branch off. They may not want to say, oh, we're leaving the human species behind to become some kind of transhuman species or whatnot. But the reality is that's probably going to be much more of the case from a scientific perspective, that yes, we have become something. And I also foresee that in 20, 30 years, people will replace limbs. In fact, I would be the first to, if I could, replace my arm with a robotic arm if it's that much stronger. And I certainly will replace things like my heart. I think that's already happening. It'll probably be 5 or 10 years before we start doing that on a kind of a commercial level. So I do believe that the species is going to change and become a new one, and I'm actually very for that. I realize that takes a lot of political correctness to make it sink into people's heads and be okay with that without actually scaring them too much.
Yeah, to kind of expand on that a little bit, the more, to me, one of the problems I foresaw, and I was actually, like I said, I'm kind of captivated with Jethro, and I mean, Knight is, like I said, he's interesting, but because the book does absolutely make you think. It really, it really draws that out of you and forces you into kind of confronting some of these things that we just kind of take for granted, which I really like that type of book. But kind of expanding on that a little bit, I could see some of the more religious basically saying we're made in God's image, therefore we can't deviate from that path or whatever God wanted us to be. And even though Jethro says some, in my opinion, pretty horrific things, at the end of the day, he allows the religion to stay around. And what I was wondering is when you look at this, if we have if we take today, the vast majority of the people on the planet basically pushing back, do you think it's going to take some type of fundamental change, almost outlawing religion, or do you think that can coexist, or are we going to have two separate type of groups, one that embraces it, one that doesn't? And if so, where do you see that kind of stuff going?
Well, so again, it's an excellent question, because it kind of comes down to the core of what we think we are as a species and where we're actually heading. I tend to hope and be optimistic that, and I haven't really said this too much publicly, but I'm kind of happy to do so here, that I do believe that religious people, religious leaders themselves, in order to keep their religion surviving, because the atheist and secular population is just growing too quickly, I think. And not only that, religion, the sense of it is shifting. People may still be religious, but they're apathetic about it. So it's not the same thing as, most people deeply believing it anymore. So at least, of course, in certain parts of the world, it's not like that. But I believe in America, there's a whole younger generation coming that, even if they call themselves religious, they're as much technologist or, pro-transhumanist, I think, deep down inside, without even knowing it, than they are as saying they're going to follow Christ to the end of the world or something. So I think ultimately what's going to happen is the religious leaders, and you can see the Pope already doing this, opening up their philosophies to incorporate the new changes that are coming. And that's the only way that I actually see them surviving, religious, major, formal religions surviving, at least in any kind of significant population. So I think over the next 10 or 15 years, yes, there will be ultra fanatical religious leaders that are fight the transhumanists and fight technology all the way around, and not necessarily transhumanists, but fight progress as much as they can. But I think broadly, a lot of religious leaders will say, you know what, in order to survive, in order to keep harmony in society, and in order to continue to believe in what their concept of the goodness of God and the goodness in the human race, they will adapt. And so I'm optimistic that there can be a peaceful transition. Now, my novel doesn't play to that tune at all. It sets up the controversy. It sets up the conflict. And I definitely believe in 5 to 10 years, there will be conflicts. You'll see them on the streets. You're going to hear about it repeatedly. That said, I think, as I mentioned, in the long term, 10, 20, 30 years, technology will have a way commercially of working out and getting everyone to just say, well, let's meet at the table. Let's try to go down this path together. And I really see, for example, just formal Christianity just saying, well, our version of what the human being is could be a little bit different than what it is biblically. And I think that's the way that society and civilization can make it harmoniously through that process. I'm hopeful that'll happen, even though I write of a very different story in my book where the conflict ends in a real world war.
Right. Yeah. And to me, it almost seems, and not to step on you too much, but it almost seems like the book, at least in my opinion, is a little more realistic based on the two belief systems. I mean, and maybe I'm wrong on this, and please correct me, but it seems like, especially from Jethro's perspective, the mortality dictates his morality. So, and it's an objective good for him to seek and try to do everything he possibly can to become immortal. In fact, he talks a lot about the sacrifices that need to be made and what, some of the radical things that would be done if, and I mean, it's interesting that he never actually goes through with them, but through some of the conditions he gets to do, or I shouldn't say gets to do, is I guess forced to do them. But I mean, do you think that being that, I guess, well, you kind of answered already. I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it seems to me that, I guess the question is from a transhumanist perspective, do you follow that, seeking and trying to get the immortality is that critical where it would trump other, I guess, cultural and individual rights?
So, and I'll try to answer your question like more deeply, at least from a personal perspective. I kind of gave you what I generally feel will probably happen in a 30 year scan of, let's say, society. But I definitely believe that any sense of irrational types of beliefs, anything that can't be proven, does probably, at least historically speaking, probably in the present, causes quite a bit of harm in the actual attempt to achieve immortality or indefinite lifespans through science and technology. I think it gets in the way.